Today I'm joined by former Major League closer Matt Capps. As a current broadcaster for the Pittsburgh Pirates with more than 130 saves in the big leagues, Matt talks about his experience as a multi-sport athlete growing up and how he went from almost quitting baseball to the big leagues in less than a year's time. Matt, good to see you, brother.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. It's going to be fun. I know we crossed paths in Atlanta, so that's where I want to start with you. You're an Atlanta area kid, right? Born and raised?
I am. Grew up in Douglasville. Moved around, obviously, playing for as long as I did. I've called a lot of different areas home, but home base is now in Roswell, just a little north of Atlanta.
Sure. And you played multiple sports growing up, right?
I did, and I preach that. I've got a little program back home. We've got 11 teams, and we kind of set it up in the fall baseball, where nothing is mandatory because fall is football season. And then nothing is mandatory in the wintertime because the wintertime is basketball season. We have practice abilities and we have training facilities that you can have access to as part of our program. But I preach in football, focus on football. Baseball is secondary. In wintertime, focus on basketball or wrestling or whatever else it is you're into and doing, and baseball is secondary. But with that being said, come spring and summertime, baseball is a priority, and we expect to be the priority, our program. But yeah, myself, I played baseball, basketball, and football growing up. Played 1 year of soccer. There was too much running in soccer. For a guy of my body type, soccer didn't fit. I ended up being the goalie after I think the second or third practice, something like
right.
that. My best friend growing up was a really, really good soccer player, actually one of the top soccer players in the state of Georgia. And I wanted to do it just to be around Will. His name was Will North. And then he played baseball with me, kind of same thing. He wasn't that much into baseball, but he's like, go play on Matt's team and hang out with him. And then
that's cool.
As I got older, my parents had a rule for my brother and myself. You either had to be actively playing a sport or you had to go get a job. So my brother ran track and went to work, and I lettered in 4 sports in high school because I wasn't ready to go make money.
So what, I want to go back to before we get back to your sort of your childhood, tell me a little bit more about this program. Cause I'm similar. I think we've talked about this in the past. Similarly, a big advocate of kids playing multiple sports. What kind of response have you gotten? It's one thing, I grew up in New England, right? So it's one thing to say, you're going to play different sports because you don't have the option to play baseball year round in Boston, right? But in Atlanta, you do. So what's the response been like for that program?
It's been really good. It started 2 years ago. So my son is 11 now. And I kind of fell back in love with baseball with him. When my career ended, I was a little bitter about how it ended, and got hurt, shoulder injury, ended my playing days. And then he started playing at 6, and I was kind of watching. And then at 7 years old, he really started to kind of take a liking to it. And I fell back in love with the sport, watching him fall in love with the sport. And then I started coaching at 8. At 9, was an all-star at the park. And then at 10, the parents kind of wanted to do this travel thing. So we found a program we hooked on to, had a great experience. That program was called the Georgia Bombers. Those guys were great to us. But after the 10U season, we wanted to keep our team together, and understood we kind of had to go through the process, the tryouts, and we were technically the 3rd team. So the top 2 teams would be able to pick from our roster, and I couldn't guarantee my parents that we would all stay together. So I went to the city that I live in, Roswell, and talked to them about kind of a travel program. I had 3 teams that wanted to come with us. It would be my son's upcoming 11 team, my business partner's son's upcoming 12U team, and then my neighbor's upcoming 13U team. And we were going to kind of build it organically that way. The city, in hindsight, I've kind of discovered that there were some people on the Parks and Rec board, and maybe even city council, that had started laying the groundwork and were recruiting me a little bit to kind of do something like this. So their Parks and Rec program really dropped off dramatically after 10U, and they were losing a lot of really good players from 11U and up. They were going to travel programs outside of their town, our town, and they wanted to try and build a program to keep kids in Roswell. So it was kind of the perfect storm for me. They did require us to do a tryout. We're using city fields for practice and games and stuff like that, using some city resources. So um, that's taxpayer dollars. So it's got to be a benefit to the taxpayer. So we had to open it up. We've got some rules and guidelines that we have to fall within from the city with roster construction. But the biggest thing was they said you had to do a tryout. So you may not believe this, but we actually published 4 days before our tryout last year that we were starting a new program. And in age groups 11 to 14, so just 4 age groups of teams, we had 360 kids show up
Wow.
with 4 days of notice.
Wow.
So it was an absolute scramble on my end. It was a zoo, if I'm being honest. I'm not a very organized person. My entire life, I've been told where to be, what to wear, uh, and what the objective was when I got there. So me trying to put it together was really interesting. Frustrated a lot of parents, a lot of coaches, but we got through it. We just finished our first season. A handful of our teams are played last weekend, and I think some of our older teams play again this weekend, and then they're done. Our 11U team was done Father's Day weekend, so we got 2 tournaments in the fall, and we played 10 tournaments this spring. We finished right around 500, which a lot of people may kind of roll their eyes back when I say that's our goal. Our goal is to finish about 500 at this age group. Really all the way up through high school. Our goal is to play 500 baseball. And my thought process there is there's levels in travel baseball. A, double A, triple A majors level is how they classify them. And unless we're in majors, beating the brakes off everybody, we're not challenging the kids enough. So if we're in triple A and we're, we go 4-1 in a tournament, the next tournament we may go to majors and see how we compete. Vice versa, if we're in majors and we're just not losing any game, we're playing non-competitively, we're going to drop down to triple A or double A, so that we don't demoralize the kids. We want to give them an opportunity to win, but we also want to challenge them. We want them to know that no matter what they think of themselves, there's always somebody else out there that is probably better and is willing to work harder, and we want to push these kids. So that's our goal. We finished, I think we were 1 game under 500, so we finished right around that 500 mark, which I was happy with. And I talked about it a little bit before, kind of making football the priority in the fall. So one thing we did last fall that I thought was really cool, as a startup organization, we didn't have any culture. So we were trying to develop that. So we took a big high school size field in the fall, which is way too big for all of our age groups, 11 to 14. And we all practiced together every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And what that did was that allowed the kids that had football on Tuesdays and Thursdays, they could only come on Wednesday. They could come once a week. And in 3 weeks' time, they would get all 3 practice plans. They would get to experience all 3 practice plans. So on Tuesday, what we did, let's say this week, and next week will be different, and the next week will be different. Tuesday this week, we would do pitchers and catchers. So you work on the skill sets of pitching and catching. And if you're not a catcher, you don't have to participate in the blocking and the throwing down to second base and stuff like that. But we believe in everybody pitching. I don't like the term PO, pitchers only, 11 to really 16, or really even through high school. I think everybody should learn the pitching skill. So pitchers would work on the fundamentals or mechanics of the throw. They would also work on things like PFPs, or pitchers fielding practice. We're learning how to cover first base, the footwork around first base, how to stay in fair territory, how to cover home plate. That's something I didn't learn until pro ball. How to properly cover home plate and protect myself. I can't just go in like a out of control, get my foot beside the plate, my knee not in a good spot, where if a guy slides in from third base, slides into the side of my knee, I'm hurt. I've got to learn that footwork, how to position my body, and it starts from the ground up. Communication as a pitcher. Once the ball comes out of my hand, I become a fielder. So we went through all that stuff. It wasn't just throwing bullpens and then going your way. And then on Wednesday this week, we would do infield and hitting. So we'd have an hour and a half. We're going to take as many ground balls as we can get. We're going to learn footwork around second base. We're going to learn how to cover bunt plays, run bunt plays, and stuff like that, which I only believe in one bunt play. Everything comes off of it. But we did all sorts of infield stuff, and then half the group would be in the cage, and then we would flip. So you're getting your swings in. And then Thursday would be outfield. So we did fly balls. We worked on cutoffs and relays, getting the ball into the cutoff guy, throwing to the bags, second base, third base, home plate, things like that. And the other half would be hitting, and then we would switch. And then next week, those days would just push up.
Right.
So start next week. Tuesday would be infield and hitting, Wednesday outfield, Thursday pitching. And then the next week it would cycle up one more time. So it went really well, and we had all the kids together. We had 11 to 14 together. This year we're going to do it a little bit differently. We found some problems with that age gap. The physical maturity level of an 11-year-old compared to a 14-year-old is pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
So we struggled with that at times. But the thought process behind putting them all together was getting back to that culture in the organization that we were trying to develop.
That's great.
An 11-year-old looks up to a 14-year-old. They listen to 14-year-olds better than they listen to adults that are out there a lot of times. And then I've learned so much more about the game of baseball from trying to coach it and teach it than I ever did playing.
Isn't that amazing?
So it's incredible. So we really, really and truly tried to encourage the older kids to take the younger kids under their wing, mentor them, do things like getting the glove out in front of you. And as they try to explain it to the younger kids, our hope was, oh my gosh, okay, this is why coach is all on me about this or that. And it kind of clicks. And we saw it happen some. So I think for the most part, it worked really well. Just that age gap was tough. So I think this year we're going to do 2 years. So we're adding a 9 and 10 age group this year. So we'll have the 9 and 10s work out together, the 11s and 12s work out together, the 13s and 14s work out together, and we're also moving up into 15U. So the 15U will kind of be on their own. So that's
cool.
That's our hope for and plan, I guess. For
that's
this
great.
fall.
How is the I know football's a big deal, right? In Georgia, at least when you get to the high school level, but even at the youth level, like has there been pushback from either from parents or from kids or from coaches or what have you with other sports that are you're pushing them to play other sports, but what's the response been with the non-baseball athletes or the multi-sport athletes, I should say, not non-baseball?
It's been good. It's been good. So in the parents meeting with myself and with other coaches, I mean, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. I encourage it. In the fall time, we're going to play Sunday only tournaments. There's not football games and workouts on Sunday. So if you can when your team needs you to compete and we need numbers, we need you there. You're paying for it. Your team needs you, I guess, which is the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
So come on Sundays and compete. If you haven't been to a practice all fall, that is fine. We're only playing 2, maybe 3 Sunday-only tournaments in the fall. So you're talking about a commitment in the fall of 2 to 3 days that you really need to be there. Still not saying have to be there. I understand 13 and 14 more so than the 11s and 12s. Kids are starting to go through maturity. They're hitting that stage in life where they're going to be sore. Don't want to put them in a position where they're playing sore and then soreness turns into an injury. So uncomfortable becomes pain, and it actually we're hurt now.
Yep.
So we do ask for that communication in the fall, but it's been very well received. Parents seem to like it. Kids seem to like it. And then, from my standpoint, I learned a lot of things on a football field that helped me on the pitching mound. I learned
no doubt
a lot of movements physically on a basketball court, how to think fast and react. And then, I mentioned I lettered in 4 sports in high school. I also ran 1 year cross country. And the mental toughness that I learned running cross country. It's just me in my head in the middle of the woods, and I'm supposed to run for 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That that mental toughness that I learned in cross country has helped me in so many areas of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir on that. You grew up in the middle of it. Did you play, you play, like travel? Did you play at East Cobb?
I did. I played 1 year for James Beavers and the East Cobb Yankees.
Okay.
Um, I played American Legion ball.
Yeah.
Uh,
Same here.
it was basically my high school team,
Okay.
the core of my high school team. Played post 145. We played American Legion baseball, and then I made a high school all-star team after my junior year, and I played with some of the better high school players in the whole state of Georgia. And I actually got hurt that summer. I broke my foot and missed my senior year of football, and the back half of summer baseball. I was supposed to play for East Cobb that summer. Got hurt, missed it. I also was invited to come try out in Joplin for Team USA after the Team Georgia stuff, but I missed all that.
Yep.
So I played my senior year of baseball. So I broke my foot, got out of a cast. A couple of days later, I had surgery on a hernia, so I missed basketball my senior year also. But I did play my senior season of baseball, and then I went and played for James Beavers and the East Cobb Yankees.
Yeah. So that in particular has, East Cobb specifically, right? Used to be, I guess it was never small, but it used to be a little bit more select, right? It used to be a
Yeah,
little bit leaner, and now it's a huge operation, right? And that's where I wrestle with it as a, somebody who used to make a living evaluating talent, but also as a father, right? Like the diversity of skills you get, the different experiences you get. It's even different being a teammate, right? Like it's different being a football teammate than it is being a baseball teammate. There's just different
absolutely.
requirements of you, and so this push to um, this push to specialize early. That's why I love to hear what you guys are doing. I remember when I first started scouting, I was scouting in the Atlanta area, and it was the year Jason Hayward got drafted out of your neck
Okay.
of the woods, right? And so went and scouted Jason, and Jason looked roughly like he does now when he was 17 years old, and at least his senior year, he may have played other sports earlier. He was baseball only, right? Now he was going to be a high round pick and probably some risk mitigation involved there, I imagine. But I just couldn't help. I'm like, man, can you imagine being like the high school football coach and seeing that kid walk the halls and be like, come on, man, you can't come play tight end or linebacker
Right,
for me,
right.
So it's the balance, right? Where you know, I think you have to. That's why, like I said, I'm glad you guys are pushing that, because I think that needs to be pushed, because there's a lot of pressure from the other end, no matter what the sport, basketball, football year round, spring games, all this stuff. Like there's pressure on these kids at an early age to like, all right, pick a sport and specialize. Otherwise you can't do it, and look, you played 4 sports growing up. You played American Legion baseball. You pitched in the big leagues for a while, right? Like you can do it. You can do it both ways.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and I understand both conversations. Try and specialize, and sometimes, honestly, those things are out of your hands. You mentioned Jason Hayward and his physicality that the good Lord gave him. It just blessed. Um, there's guys on the flip side of it that you look at. They can play pretty good baseball. They can play shortstop. They can play second base. They can run and get it in the outfield. And you look at them compared to the other kids, and you're going to get hurt on a football field or
Mm-hmm.
a basketball court. You look at guys on TV playing basketball, and they look small, and they're 6'4".
Uh-huh.
It's oh, everybody else around them 7 foot. Well, they look
Yep.
tiny, but they're 6'4", and they can move, and they can jump, and they can run, and things like that. So you look at the physicality of what you have, the physical attributes of what you have. I do understand some of those kids that want to specialize, and mom and dad maybe um, don't want them on a football field because they're afraid of them getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
I do understand that, but I, my experience, my story, it's what I know. It's intimate to me, and I know for certain, like you said, how to be a teammate because of football, basketball. the mental toughness from running cross country, a lot of things that I learned in other sports uh, just really helped me as a Major League Baseball player. You know, the cross country people might listen to this or hear me talk. Go, this guy's crazy. He's out of his mind. But when I'm in the middle of the woods and I've got a task of running whatever it is, 75 or 90 minutes, that's your training day for the day. It's just you. When you're on a Major League Baseball field and you're on the pitcher's mound and things are going crazy, a lot of times it's just you. It's too loud to hear your third baseman or to hear your first baseman or to hear your catcher. It's just you and your thoughts, and how are you going to process that? How are you going to handle that? And to kind of have that training, if you will, at 15, 16 years old, I have zero doubts that helped me.
No, that's great. I think you don't hear cross country mentioned a lot. You hear track and some of maybe the more explosive track and field type events, but cross country, long distance running, I think it's a great analogy, especially as a pitcher, right? Because if you're a starter, you're going once every 5 days. You get a lot of downtime by yourself,
Yeah.
and so being disciplined and being able to figure that out. I've never run cross country, but I've done some sort of longer distance, walks or marches or runs or whatever. And it's like you hit that. Everybody talks about that runner's high. You got to break through it. I've never broken through that wall, I guess, because I hate running. But yeah, I mean, it's just a different requirement on your body and your mind. And I want to talk about that a little bit as it relates to your pro career, right? So you get into pro ball as a starter and struggled, right? Couldn't get out of A ball for a couple of years. And the unique thing about your path was that, like, a lot of guys sort of can't succeed as a starter, or for whatever reason it doesn't click for them, they get shifted to the bullpen, all of a sudden they flourish. There's a million guys like that, but yours was so fast, right? You shifted to the bullpen, at least on paper. I'm sure it may have felt differently, but you went from a couple years in A ball, and then you shifted to the pen, and you touched, I think, 3 levels in the minors and got to the big leagues in September in 1 year. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
So that sped up on you quick once you went to bullpen.
It did, and I think a lot of guys going from starters to relievers is really based upon the repertoire they have. When you look at my career and what I was able to do on the mound, I only had a career because I could command my fastball. That's it. I learned a slider in the big leagues. When I first got to the big leagues in September, I threw a curveball. I didn't throw a slider. And then you'll appreciate this being in the game. After my first couple of weeks in the big leagues, that September, they asked me to go to instructional league. Yeah. So I went to instructional league. And I'm grateful I did, because I honestly don't know that I would have made the team. And I'll give the full story and explain that if I hadn't gone to instruct. So let me back up. It was I got drafted in 2002. Went to rookie ball, and I signed late. So I only had, I think, 6 weeks of the season left. And they put me in the bullpen because they didn't have time to really build me up. And
sure.
I wasn't built up in high school. I was a catcher. I was going to LSU to catch. I really came onto the scene as a pitcher. That high school all-star tournament or team that I made, I referenced earlier. Brian McCann was on that team. Jeff Francoeur was on that team. I hit cleanup on that team, and Mac and I split the catching duties. So when I would catch, he would play left field, and then when he would catch, I would play left field. And I was in left field one night. Brandon Moss, another big leaguer, was also on that team. Brandon Moss was one of our better pitchers. He was actually our number 2 pitcher behind a guy named Fidel Pinkston. And we were beating – I always tell the story it was Team Canada, but I'm not 100% sure it was Team Canada that we were beating. We were beating somebody really badly. And we had Team California in the championship series the next night. So Stuart Chester, who's now the head coach at Buford High School, he was at Cartersville at the time, was the head coach, or he might have been the assistant, him and Coach McDonald, who had been at Wheeler. Both of them Georgia Hall of Fame coaches, high school Hall of Fame coaches. I was in the dugout getting ready to hit, and I heard them talking about pitching. and they didn't want to go to Friedel. They didn't want to go to Brandon, having the Team California games the next night. And I said, you know what, I can throw. I mean, I came in and threw for my high school team, but I was our third, maybe fourth pitcher on my high school team. I was catching. And they kind of looked at me and was like, all right, you got it. I mean, we're up by 10. So I guess in their mind, it was like, all right, if things hit the fan, then and we have to go to one of the other guys, we can.
Right.
So I came in to throw the last 2 innings and was 96 to 97 on the mound. And back then, there were a bunch of scouts in the stands, as you can imagine. You got the high school all-star teams from all the states in the country.
So you were bumping 97, but you were 3 or 4 in your high school rotation?
So what I would do in high school, I mean, we had some guys, 7 of the 9 starters my senior year played after high school.
Okay.
So we had some good players.
Okay.
Kid named Kaysen Britt, lefty. His dad pitched in pro ball for a long time, Wes Britt. I mean, Kaysen was awesome. He got hurt our sophomore year, and velocity never came back, kind of like how my career ended. But he did end up pitching his junior and senior year, and he could just command the baseball so well, had a really good changeup, and he was left-handed in high school. So he was good. He went on to college and pitched for a couple of years.
So you were just a thrower. You would come in and just throw heat when they needed you to.
That's all I did. That's all I did.
All right.
I had like what you would call a slurve. Like I basically threw it like a football, and it would in high school it was real big and loopy, and like, when you're throwing hard in high school and then you throw a big loopy thing, like guys don't hit it.
Yep.
So after that tournament, kind of everything on the pro side was you're going to pitch, because it was 20 years ago we didn't you didn't have as many guys that throw that hard. Yeah, right. And they really didn't think that you could train guys to throw hard like we've learned in the last few years that you can. So I got drafted as a pitcher. Honestly, I hated pitching. I hated everything about pitching. Every time I pitched, my arm would hurt. I would get sore. I just didn't like it. And I loved to hit, and I loved just kind of the dirtbag mentality of catching. The rough.
Was there any, when you got drafted as a pitcher, was there any thought to not signing because you liked hitting so much? Or you're like, this is pro ball, I got to go?
No, there was. So I was going to LSU. I knew I was going to have a great experience in college playing in a program like that. Even looked at, it was still when the draft and follow was a possibility. Looked at going to Chipola. Went down and visited Coach Johnson at Chipola. Was awesome. But my family situation, my dad had his second heart attack on my 17th birthday, and he was self-employed. So I knew from a family perspective, if I went to college, it was going to be extremely tough, even with the scholarship on my parents. And I just came to the realization at the end of the day, I'm going to college to play baseball. So let's go. So I get drafted in 2002. They send me to rookie ball, and they put me in the bullpen. I gave up 1 run in 13 innings. Had a great introduction year to pro ball. We worked on things like things I'd never done, holding runners on, being quick to the plate. I mean, I was like a 1-7 to home plate. So things like that. I really learned the mechanics that I pitched in my career. I learned as a professional baseball player. Miguel Bonilla was my first pitching coach in rookie ball. He's a guy I still keep in touch with. I credit him and Ray Searage probably more than any other pitching coaches I had in pro ball for the successes I had. So the next year, 2003, I go to spring training. They keep me in extended. They keep me in rookie ball, and I'm starting. Had a great year as a starter. Made the Gulf Coast League All-Star team. And then in August, they send me to High A to make a spot start. Dave Clark's my manager. So it's kind of my first introduction into real baseball. Rookie ball, you're playing at 12 o'clock. There's 7 people at the games, and 5 of them are related to somebody.
Yeah.
So I go to Lynchburg, make a spot start. I throw well. I go back to Bradenton, rookie ball, finish out the playoffs there. Did not pitch well in the playoffs against the Braves, actually. Jared Saltalamacchia hit a pitch that still hasn't landed. We end up losing to the Braves in the Gulf Coast League championship, and then they send me back to Lynchburg to help the Lynchburg team in the playoffs. And I'm pitching out of the bullpen through the playoffs, and was actually supposed to start Game 5 of the playoffs, and we ended up losing Game 4. Pitched well there, and then go to Instructs. Come to spring training in 04. They named me the opening day starter in Low A in Hickory, and I didn't make it out of the second inning on opening night, and that's kind of how the season went in 04. Send me down to Williamsport. That's where I was first introduced to Ray Searage. So Williamsport was short season, and my year started to get a little bit better, but it just never turned around. So was going to retire after the 04 season, and it was January, and I was talking to my dad. I had some opportunities to play college football, Division I opportunities to play college football. So I was going to go to a small school, play a year, and see if I could transfer out. I was 21 years old. And my dad talked me out of it. He said, "Look, Matt, it's January. You can't enroll until the fall semester anyway. So go to spring training, go play. If you can't make it in baseball, like you'll know by the summer. Then you enroll somewhere and see what happens on the football side." So you know what, that makes sense. So I went to spring training. Was pitching fairly well in spring training. They called me in the last day of spring training, and I remember walking down the hallway to see Brian Graham and Jeff Bannister. Graham was our farm director. Bannister was our field coordinator. And I thought they were going to release me. This is it. I'm going to drive home today, and we'll start the football thing. And they sit me down. And they said, "Hey, we're moving you to the bullpen." And I don't know if it was fluff at the time. Knowing what I know now, I think they were being honest. But they said, "When we drafted you, we saw you more as a bullpen guy anyway, but you had so much success that first year as a starter, we were going to see how far you could go." I said, "Okay." So I go back to Hickory in the bullpen, and it was the first series. We were in Greensboro.
Where was your head at when you had that conversation? Did you want to be a starter? Did you care?
I did want to be a starter, and things have changed a little bit. But back then, when they moved you from a starter to the bullpen, it was kind of your first foot out the door.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, all right, the writing's on the wall. I'm an organizational guy now. I'm a fill-in guy. So that was kind of the mindset. I get to Hickory, and it was the first series. We were in Greensboro, and the guy that was closing for us legitimately threw 100. No idea where it was going. So he pitched bad in one game, and then the next time he came in to pitch, he loaded the bases and no outs. We're up by 1 or 2. I don't remember exactly, but it was a save situation still. They bring me in, no outs, bases loaded, and I get a strikeout, a pop out, and a strikeout to end the ball game. And then I started closing for the Hickory team. Year kind of took off. Had a great year as a closer in Hickory. Guys were starting to move to Lynchburg, and June, July, I was kind of sitting. I still kind of thought like, all right, I was right. I'm an organizational guy. And then the last day of July, Jeff Branson is my manager. Brano and Ray called me into the office. We're in Charleston, West Virginia, and they were messing with me, making me feel like I'd gotten in trouble, which wasn't uncommon at that stage of my life. And they sit me down and literally racking my brain, like, what did I do? I didn't do anything dumb the last couple of weeks. And they tell me I'm going to Altoona, which is AA, so I'm skipping over Lynchburg. So excited, ride the bus back to Hickory with the team, and I'm flying out the next morning to Erie, Pennsylvania. I don't pitch the first night. The second night in Erie, I come in and pitch the 6th, 7th, 8th inning. I don't remember. But it was a day game in Erie, and I remember throwing my last warm-up pitch, catcher throws it down, and Jose Bautista is my third baseman. So Joey Batts comes over, and I had known Jose a little bit from instructs and other things in the lower levels. Jose comes over and he flips me the baseball and he goes, "Hey, they only swing one bat up here too." And it kind of, I don't know if he could tell I was nervous or on edge. It kind of gave me a piece. It's like, yeah, all right, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a clean inning. And then that night, the guy that had been closing hurt his elbow. So we get back to Altoona. Jeff Andrews, the pitching coach, comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, you're our closer now. You're going to close for us. So be ready in the ninth inning." So from August 2nd until the end of the playoffs in early September in AA, I was closing and pitching really well in Altoona. And this is kind of doing the right thing, being in the right place at the right time, and performing kind of comes into play here. We're driving back from Akron. We just lost in the playoffs. And Tony Beasley was our manager, and he had gone up and down the bus kind of telling a handful of guys that they were going to AAA to help the AAA team kind of be extra bodies for the playoffs there. And one of the guys that he had asked to go, his wife had had a baby about a month earlier, so he wanted to go home. So it opened up an opportunity for another body. So it's 2:30 in the morning. We're in the Altoona clubhouse packing our stuff up, and I'm staying with a host family. So my host family's there waiting on me to go out the door, and Beasley taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, there's one more spot in AAA. If they want another body, will you go?" Absolutely, I'll go. You know, I got nothing waiting for me at home. Had a great year. Let me go. And candidly, all I was thinking is like, all right, I'm making how much in AA? Because a month ago I was making $950.
Right.
I've made now $1,200 a month, and
Uh-huh.
then AAA, I might make another $1,200. Like, I'm going to retire.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he goes, "Okay, keep your phone on you." And the next morning, Brian Graham calls me. Brian's our farm director again, and he says, "Hey, we want another arm in AAA. Will you go?" And I said, "Of course." And he gives me I figured I've already had him change your flight, so flight was leaving like 20 minutes after my original flight was supposed to fly to Atlanta. He goes, "You're flying to Toledo, meet the team. Today's an off day. Game one of the series, championship series, is tomorrow." So I get to the hotel, and it's a lot nicer hotel than what I'm used to staying at. Still not a big league hotel, but it's a lot nicer than what I'm used to staying at. And I see the handful of guys that I know are sitting kind of in the hotel bar area, and then Trent Jewett, the manager, is sitting down there too. And that was like a big no-no. If you walk into a place and the manager's there and it's not the ballpark, you turn around and leave.
Mm-hmm.
So I was real uncomfortable. But they were having their pitchers and catchers meeting. So Trent calls me over, sits me down. We go over like the lineup for the Toledo Mud Hens that we're facing in the series. And the only name I remember is Donnie Kelly. We talked about how to face guys, how to pitch guys. So get into game one. Brian Bullington starts. He struggles. I come in, I believe, in the third inning. And I finish the third inning. I throw a clean fourth inning, throw a clean fifth inning. We lose. Game two, we lose. And then we go back to Indianapolis. Off day in between, go back to Indianapolis. And Mike Conley pitches game three. And he's throwing well. We have like an hour and a half rain delay. So Conley doesn't go back out. I think it was the second inning I came in. I pitched the second inning and then a clean third inning. And then they brought somebody else in. We ended up losing that game late, if memory serves me. So it was a best of 5 series. So the series is over. Go into the clubhouse. Everybody's kind of somber. And I walk into the food room in Indianapolis, and I see Outback has been catered. And I'm like, this is amazing. There's a big steak. There's an Alice Springs chicken. There's a salad. There's breadsticks. There's all that stuff. And I'm like, this is incredible. And it's 2:00 in the morning because of the big rain delay.
Yep.
So a lot of guys are sitting there. I get a plate. I sit down, and about the time I'm ready to cut into some food, Trent Jewett, the manager, walks in and he's shaking everybody's hand and telling guys, great season, love having you play for me, whatever he's saying. He walks by me, shakes my hand, and he goes, "Hey, thanks for coming up and helping. Really appreciate your contribution. And then he walks out. So I sit back down, and again, right at about the time I have my knife and my fork, he comes around the corner again and like makes eye contact with me and waves me over. So I walk out the door, and he's standing with his back to this cinder block wall, white cinder block wall in the clubhouse. And he sticks his hand out, shakes my hand, and goes, "Congratulations, you're going to the big leagues," and walks off. and I'm standing there looking at this wall like, what? And then I turn and look, and as he's walking off, Brian Graham and Jeff Bannister are walking to us, and they both have these huge smiles on their face. They hug me, congratulate me. And they're like, your flight's tomorrow morning. So, okay. So I go get I never go back in the food room.
No, you didn't finish the steak.
No, I didn't even start. So I go into the clubhouse, and I get my phone, and I go down to the dugout, and as I'm starting to dial my dad's number, like I'm getting emotional. And I consciously thought, like, it's 3:00 in the morning back home. So I called my brother, who was 16 at the time. I was a high school sophomore or junior. I called him, and he wakes up, and he's like, "Hey, great game. We listened to it on the radio. You coming home tomorrow?" And I said, "No, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh." And he goes, "Oh, okay. You're going to go hang out with Zach." So Zach Duke had already gotten to the big leagues, and Duke and I were really, really close. He was the best man in his wedding. And I said, "No, I'm going to go pitch." And he's like, "Oh, okay. All right. What?" And I said, "Hey, I can't get through this talking to Dad. You got to go wake up Mom and Dad and tell them." So he goes into their room, and as you can imagine, a mother,
Yeah.
her 16-year-old son at 3:00 in the morning with his phone to the ear, and wakes her up. She starts screaming like, what's happened? What's wrong? What's going on? Hold on, wake up Dad. So it was pretty cool. I got to listen to him tell them that I was going to the big leagues.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that was a fun moment for me. And then the day got crazy. The next day I was supposed to get on a flight in the morning. Hensley Mullins, Bam Bam, was our head coach.
Yeah.
Hensley and I were on the same flight. The other guys that were going from Indianapolis to Pittsburgh drove. They drove that night or the next morning, I guess. So our flight gets canceled. So they get us on another flight. We get on that plane. There's engine trouble. They bring a mechanic out. They're working on all this stuff. Long story short, we land in Pittsburgh at like 6:20, something like that. 7:00 game. We get in a cab. Neither one of us have our bags. We get in a cab. We come to the ballpark, and Bam Bam's like, "I don't have my ID. We can't get in the stadium." Doesn't have his Pirates ID. And I'd never been to spring training, so I didn't have an ID, didn't have any of that stuff. So he calls Brian Minetti. So Brian Minetti's a front office guy, assistant GM. He comes down, meets us, and Brian and I had a little bit of a history. So he was an intern when I was in rookie ball. It's kind of a cool story. He drove the van that picked me up from the airport the first day I was a professional player. So it's like, he's nervous, I'm nervous. We kind of struck up this nervous energy conversation, and anytime I'd see him, we would interact. So he gives me a hug, congratulates me. It's like, "This is awesome," that whole stuff. He walks Hensley and I down to the clubhouse. I get in there, and like I said, our bags were on the flight that got canceled. So we didn't have any of our equipment stuff, our luggage, nothing. So I get there. Fortunately, I'd had one of my gloves in my backpack. So I had my own glove. I'm wearing Brian Bullington's cleats. I'd never been in the big leagues, so they didn't know like pant sizes or any of that stuff. It's a hodgepodge of things that I've got going out there. Brand new hat. So I walk out into the dugout in the top of the 5th inning. Zach Duke's pitching. And he would kind of zero in on his start days. So I didn't call him. He had no idea what was coming up. After he gets blasted out in the 5th inning, he comes over to the dugout. I fist bump him, and he just kind of looks at me in like shock. So I didn't have time to talk. I go out to the bullpen. So I get to the bullpen in the bottom of the 5th inning, and I pitched the top of the 7th inning.
Come on.
So it's like it happens so fast. Um, and
Probably the
I
best thing
mean,
that could have happened. No time to think about anything.
absolutely, absolutely. And I had pitched the night before. I had thrown an inning plus the night before. So um, Chris Denorfia, the first pitch I throw in the big leagues, Chris Denorfia hits the ball 300 exit velocity right by, boom. So, okay, well, here we are.
Welcome to the big leagues.
Yeah, yeah. So that was my got called to the big league story, and then I ended up pitching 4 or 5 times that September. Gave up a run in that first game, uh, and then at the end of the season, we're in LA, and Pete McCannon was our intern manager. They had fired Lloyd McClendon before I got there. Pete and Dave Littlefield was our general manager. They called me into the suite at the hotel in LA, and they called my room at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was accustomed to sleeping until 11
Right.
at that stage
Right.
of my life and night games.
Right.
I answer the phone and I'm like, try to spruce up real
Yeah.
fast, like take a 30
Yeah.
second shower and run up to the suite and go meet them. And they sit me down. They're like, hey, great year. We're going to send you back to Double A next year. We really want you to get really good at being a reliever first year as a bullpen guy. So we're going to send you to Instructs. We really want you to work on a slider, get rid of the bigger curveball. I said, okay. So I go to Instructs. The Pirates hired Jim Tracy as their manager not long after the season ended. So I'm in Instructs and I'm throwing 1,000 sliders a day, it feels like. And I'm running on the warning track one day after I throw, and Jim Tracy had been hired. He comes down to Bradenton and he's checking things out. He's walking down the pathway, and I know who he is. He kind of lowers his sunglasses, looks down at me, whistles, waves me over, and he said, "What's your name, son?" And I tell him, and he goes, "Didn't I see you pitch in LA against us in September?" I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "I thought so. Um, hard throwing righty." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, they wanted me to come down and work on my slider." He goes, "And you came?" I said, "Well, obviously." I didn't say that. I think I said, "Yes, sir."
Yeah.
He goes, "Well, what'd they tell you for next year?" And I said, "Well, they told me I was going to start in Double A. Last year was my first year as a reliever." And he again lowers his sunglasses. He goes, "You show up ready to go." I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "No, no, you hear me? You show up ready to go." I said, "Yes, sir." And then he kind of lifts his sunglasses up and goes on. So, small world coincidence. A guy named Ted Wood had played for Jim Tracy uh, in I think the Giants or maybe the Dodgers minor leagues. I think it was the Giants when Tracy was managing there. And Ted Wood's dad was a volunteer assistant on my high school team, Ed Wood. So Ted had taken me to a Braves game, play the Dodgers, and I had met Jim Tracy. I was a sophomore, junior in high school. Um, but small world coincidence, I guess. And then, so I never really shut it down after the '05 season. I took a couple of weeks off, and then I was throwing bullpens by Christmas. By the time I got spring training, I was mid-season form. It felt like. So I threw. I had a great spring training. They bring me down to Fort Myers. Paul Mahalam's starting. He's supposed to go 6 innings, getting stretched out. And in the 4th inning, the bullpen phone rings and said, "Get Caps going." So I started throwing. It was at the old stadium in Fort Myers, the Red Sox old place. You can't
Mm-hmm.
see anybody warming up. Jimmy Lett says, "All right, you're going in." So I go in. And honestly, I'm running across the outfield grass thinking, man, I hope Paul's okay. I know he's supposed to go, 90 pitches or whatever, and there's no way he's thrown that. Like, I hope he's not hurt. I get to the mound. Tracy's got the ball. Humberto Cota is my catcher. And Tracy just says, "All right, you got 2 outs. Go get them." Hands me the baseball. And Coda's like, "What do you want to do here?" And I was like, I have no idea. Who's up? And he looks at me and he goes, "Manny Ramirez." I said, Okay. Uh, I guess let's get ahead early. Let's attack him. Um, so I did. I ended up striking out Manny Ramirez, and I think that was what they wanted to see out of me, that I wouldn't back down
Yeah, that's
from a
amazing.
guy like him, and that's what got me on the team in '06.
So in a year's time, you go from screw this, I'm gonna go play football, I'm done,
Yeah.
to yeah, I'm striking out Manny Ramirez, and I just started my big league career basically.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
right.
combo of probably some good counsel from your dad, in addition to the talent, the work ethic, and like right place, right time, and opportunity. That's incredible,
Yep.
dude.
Yep. That's a good story. It was my life, so I certainly enjoyed it. Um,
Yeah,
but had a lot of fun. Very fortunate to be in the situations I was in, and try to take advantage of it as best I could.
yeah. I was gonna before we started talking about it, I was like, I wanted to hear about that struggle. We touched on it from starter to reliever. Some guys, to your point, it's like, oh, I don't want to be. I'm a starter. I don't want to talk about it, right? But it seemed like for you, things happened so fast. It was like, all right, we're gonna put you in the pen, and then it was like, boom, boom, boom. You're touching multiple levels. You're in big leagues in September. Then you're striking out many. Like even your big league debut, right? You show up with four different guys' equipment on, and then an hour later you're in the game, right? Who knows? Had you had more time to kind of process stuff, maybe you get in your head a little bit more, and it doesn't unfold the way it did. But it's amazing, man. Sometimes it's just take whatever opportunity is laid out in front of you and just make the most of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the bullpen fits my personality better. I don't sit. My wife will tell you, unless I'm tired and taking a nap, I don't really sit very well. I like to be busy. I like to have things to do. And as a starter, you've got 4 days. You sit there. It's just you and your thoughts. And
Mm-hmm.
I would second guess myself and then put more pressure on myself than need be. And in the bullpen, the phone rings, and 8 minutes later, you're in the game.
Yeah.
And
And if you
then,
bomb, you might be in the game the next night too.
yeah, that's right. You
Right.
don't sit. What you don't have the opportunity to sit and dwell on it as much. And then going back and looking at stuff again, I had a good fastball and I could command my fastball. I ended up developing a decent little slider, but even into my career, my slider was nothing to call home about. It was something else for guys to see, maybe bad contact, and you probably count on two hands the number of changeups I threw in an entire year. Had a changeup, had it in my back pocket, and I showed it when I was warming up, so they had to think about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I didn't compete with it a whole lot. So
It's
really, you
amazing
could.
how I've always been a huge proponent of it, but just hey, you get a fastball and you command it. It's amazing how far you can get with just that, right? I mean,
That's right.
we talk about spin rate, we talk about all the secondary stuff and this plus plus stuff, and it's like it's great. They're all weapons, but if you got to pick one, command the fastball really well. It's a pretty good calling card.
Yeah, hitting's hard, and
Yeah,
hitters will tell
certainly.
you that. A well-located fastball is still the best pitch in baseball.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, how long have you been on the broadcasting side now? You're doing TV and radio for the Pirates?
Yeah, so this is my. Let's see. I was supposed to start in 2020. Obviously, the COVID bubble that didn't happen. So I guess 21. This is my third year
Okay.
in the booth. I did a little bit of pre and post game work in 2019, and that's what I'm doing this week. Actually, I'm in the pre and post studio, so I'm not in the booth this week. But just finished in the booth in Miami. I had a 4 game series down there with the Pirates. So
So you've
uh,
got, a well established, successful major league career as a closer. Excuse me. So you may not sit a lot, but you had to sit in the bullpen. You were forced to sit, right? And watch
yeah,
7, 8 innings. So you've watched a lot of baseball in your career. What's the perspective like now where you're sitting back and you're removed from it? Has it evolved or changed for you how you watch the game now?
yeah. Most of what I watch is on TV. Obviously, even in the booth, you're in person, but we have to speak to what the viewer sees. So I look a lot in the monitor. The hardest part is just remembering how hard the game is. On TV it looks easy. It
Yeah.
really and knowing what I know about it, it looks easy. I'm removed from it. I don't have to worry about the other things. So it's like just do this. Well,
Right.
it's easier said than done. And I always try to remember that. I think I've done a good job so far on this side of the game of remembering how hard throwing a baseball is and how hard hitting a baseball is. Um, but I enjoy it. There's just something romantic about baseball that I don't feel with other sports. I watch football, watch a lot of football. I don't watch a whole lot of basketball. I watch March Madness when that comes on, the college game. But there's just something romantic about baseball. It doesn't matter who's playing, College World Series or a random Thursday night college game that's on TV. I can sit and watch a baseball game. I can sit and watch 10-year-olds play and get enjoyment out of it. But it's kind of the strategy behind it that I love. Um, I try to think along with the manager, what the manager's thinking, what they're trying to do. And it's funny how many times I reminisce back on my career. Oh, that's why they did that, or that's why, or whatnot. That you see from a different perspective when you're not in the fire. Um, I don't know if I answered.
What's one thing
But
that stands out to you as a because relievers in particular, right? They're like the it's almost like they're the offensive lineman of a major league roster, where like you come in, you do your job, especially as a middle reliever, right? You're like, oh, congratulations, you had a clean sixth inning. Nobody really cares, right? You're like,
yeah,
well, actually, the game hinged on that, and if I blew it there, you'd be hearing my name left and right the next day in the papers. So, your point about sort of keeping in mind that appreciation and respect for how hard it is to do what they do, right? And there's spots where you see a reliever come in and you just kind of have that hair stand up in the back of your neck, like, man, I've been in this spot. It doesn't feel like a tough spot to everybody else, but this is a tough spot for this guy right here.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a little different now that relievers have to face a minimum of three hitters. But how many times years ago would you see a lefty come in to face one lefty? And to your point, the whole game hinged on what they do in that one particular outing. They walk them, the game turns around. They bloop hit, or big hit, home run, whatever. The result of the game can turn. Uh, but I still get emotional in closing situations. I saw it in Miami the other day. When the Marlins guys come in, AJ Puck came in, and it's like everything is kind of turned into a show.
Yeah.
Down there, the lights are flashing,
Yeah.
and all that. It's kind of more of a show, and it's cool. I'm here for it. I dig it, if I'm being honest. But um, yeah, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. Like, golly, just that feeling, that rush of coming out of the bullpen. And the one thing I don't like about today's game is if I was a closer in today's game, coming in and then having to stop behind second base for the umpire to check my glove and check my belt and check my hat, like it kind of,
Yeah.
the up and down of it,
Yep.
it's like, it's kind of a bummer.
Yep.
Like I want to break through that gate and
Charge out there. Yeah.
Here we go. Yeah. Um, but that emotional rush of coming in the ninth inning when you're up by 3 runs or less and all eyes on you, and even though I'm going to do my job and nobody's going to talk about it, like you've got that, your team's depending on you.
Yeah.
You're the last line of defense.
Mm-hmm.
I feeling.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point about the glove check and the belt check and all that. It's like I feel like baseball they have their struggles from like a marketing standpoint, trying to capture the younger audience right now, because it's it might be a show when the closer comes in, or maybe on opening day with the flyovers, but there's a lot of downtime, right, in baseball. And even with the new rules, that's just inherent to the game. You love it. You can sit there and watch a game and enjoy it. So can I. But it's a challenge for like the hyper stimulated world that we're living in. But so if you can't, I feel like baseball is a game where you can't necessarily appreciate all the minutia unless you've experienced it. You don't necessarily have to have played in the big leagues to experience it, but to understand kind of what's going on, and the amount of or the iterations of like momentum that happen within a game or within an inning or within an at bat, right? That you can't necessarily appreciate I mean, the glove check and the belt check are sort of akin to like the opposing team calling timeout when you're just pumping strike
Right.
after strike, right? And they're trying to break your momentum. So there's all that challenges, more of the mental side of the game where I feel like sometimes relievers can struggle with this because they are more often than not wired to just go, right? They're going to come in, they're going to get 3 outs, whatever it is. Starters maybe can pace themselves both physically and mentally a little bit better or are more conditioned to do so. So when you're at an 11 and you're just going, and then they're like, all right, timeout. And you just got to stand there, right?
Right.
With just think and look around for 30 seconds and then you got to turn it back on. Some people can do that really easily. That's hard for some folks to do, to be able to like, okay, re-engage. I'm right back in. What was it? Clear the mechanism from,
Yep. Yep.
for the
I
love of the
love it.
game.
Love
Yeah.
that. Yep. And you know what? I was just telling somebody the other day that like there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
When you are on the mound, I know I said earlier like it can be loud, so loud where you can't hear the third baseman, you can't hear your catcher. But when you're in that clear the mechanism moment, that zone, if you want to call it, there can be 50,000 people screaming and yelling and chanting, and I can turn and look at my third baseman 80 feet away from me, and I can hear everything he's telling me clear as day.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how it works, and I
Yeah.
guess you have to experience it to really understand it. But it's a great feeling too when you know you're in that zone and things just work and you don't have to think. I had a mental skills coach tell me one time, like it's called channel surfing. You know, when you're in the zone, you can bounce around from the channels of your brain and how you operate. Um, just trying to find that every
Yeah.
time you take the mound is the challenge.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was talking to somebody the other day about that. And I said the difference between me and the guys that do it professionally, or the guys that do it professionally just do it a little bit better every single time, right? It's the consistency piece that makes it professional, right? And being able to fail and bounce back. There's a lot of other things that go into that, but yeah, the talent is obviously elite, but it's being able to be elite Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? That's a big challenge. It's
Absolutely.
it's always been fun for me, even seeing kids in the minor leagues. You can, if you're close enough to it, if you're sitting behind the plate or you see them in the clubhouse before or after a game, you see those kids that can do it, that can lock in. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be in the heat of the moment. It can be during a timeout. They got a pinch hitter coming up or somebody has an injury and they're talking. You just see it in their eyes. They're locked in. They're they're stalling. They're like diffusing the energy for 30 seconds while they have to. But then as soon as it comes back on, you just see them. They're focused and they're out there. They're professional. Other guys struggle with that, right? You can see them looking around, who's in the stands, who's
Yeah.
on deck, what's going on. Is there somebody warming up in the bullpen? And you're like, these guys they're not wired for success because you're playing scared at that point. You're
Yeah.
worried about everything else other than what you can control versus the guy to the point where, all right, everything is in my control until I let that ball go. Right. So those guys tend to be, it doesn't always work. You got to have the talent to back it up, but that's a big key to success for those guys.
The word you used right there, control. You got to learn to control the controllables. And I
Mm-hmm.
can't get caught up in those that I can't control. And I think that's helped me in other aspects of my life. If it's out of my hands, what can I do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I losing sleep over something I can't have an impact on? I can't worry about. I tell people all the time, like, who do you want to work with? Who do you want to do this with? Who do you want to do that with? I don't care. And it may sound selfish, but I'm really good about worrying about me. And I don't mean that in a bad way. And I think people that know me will tell you, like, I care about people and I do a lot of things for other people. But take our baseball program, for example. I'm not worried about what other programs are doing. I'm not getting caught up worrying about what other programs are doing or what other parents are looking at and seeing. I'm going to do things my way, and Derek Jeter is famous for that. He played his career his way. Um, I'm going to do it my way, how I think is right based on my lifetime experiences. And if I'm not right for you, that's fine. Go somewhere else. I'm good with that. But
Yep.
I'm gonna control the controllables, and I'm gonna spend time worrying about things that I can have an impact on, and I'm not gonna lose 1 ounce of sleep over something that I can't personally impact or direct the outcome.
Yeah, I try to embrace the same philosophy, just in my life at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think back to when I first started scouting. I was scouting for the Indians and scouted the whole fall, and it got time to publish my first scouting report. There's this guy I liked a little bit. He was okay, and I'm like, man, I agonized. My finger was hovering over that submit button for like an hour because I knew once I published it, my name's on that guy forever, right or wrong. And I just, I was a rookie scout. I didn't know what I was doing, and you try to figure out. You're like, all right, you're crowdsourcing this. Like, does the industry like this guy? Like, what other people think? I'm like, wait a second. Like, if I'm wrong, I'm gonna get fired. So I may as well just go with what I think. I don't want to get fired for somebody else being wrong, right? So it's
Right,
like
right.
fire it in, see what happens. Maybe I'll be wrong. And I got that. I didn't turn into some super scout. I didn't spend a whole life in scouting, but I felt like I had an eye for talent, and I had that piece of the peace of mind of like, okay, you know what? Like, I'm gonna do all the work up front. I'm gonna do everything I can to get this right. And then similar to like when you let that pitch go, once you hit submit, hey, if I see him next year and I change my mind, I'll resubmit a different report. I'll admit I was wrong, but like, what am I going to do? Just be scared all the time and not put it out there? You're going to miss some players.
Yep.
Yeah. So the control the controllable things, I think a lot of the good ones do that. It's hard to do, especially for kids, right? That's why I'm glad you're working with these kids to help them kind of get that mental side of it because, these kids are under more pressure than you or I were growing up just because of the world they're living in. So,
Yeah, that's right. Everything's out there.
yeah.
It's 10-year-old baseball, 11-year-old baseball. Everything's game cast on uh, Vimeo and Game Changer and all
Yeah.
that, which is great because grandparents and parents that are traveling
Yeah.
and work whatnot, they don't miss as much as our parents did and grandparents did. But that also means it's out there. It's out there for everybody to see, including their
Yeah.
buddies. And they screw up or they strike out in a big spot, like they're likely to sit in class and hear a friend like, "Oh, I saw you strike out," and they got to deal with that.
Right.
And the mentality of a kid. I mean, it was hard for me as a 20-something-year-old when I struggled. The only time I saw myself on Sports Center was when I blew a save. When I
Yeah.
struggled,
Right.
and that's hard. I can't imagine that with all your peers and people you care about what they think and how they feel at 11, 12, 13, 14 years old having to deal with that. They're growing up quicker than we had to.
Yeah, there's no doubt. My kids are younger than yours, so I'd go to my son's t-ball game and I'd have to walk by a field of kids, are a couple years older than him. They weren't like high school kids, and they got the 20-foot banner of
Yeah.
of the team with like high resolution pictures of these kids, and they're all mean mugging, and they got the eye black, and I'm like, man, those kids are like 8. What are we doing? And it's like, look, it's fun. I get it. We all wanted to play like we were big leaguers when we were little, and now these kids get to do it in a way that's way fancier than I could. So I understand it, and it's cool, but you can go way too far, and you can start doing these kids a disservice if you don't let them just be kids and have fun with it.
That's right. That's right. We've got two rules. Two rules in our whole organization: attitude and effort. You give me a good attitude, you're not always going to win. You're not always going to be successful. You strike out in a big situation or any situation, you get 5 seconds. Feel bad for 5 seconds, then you got to move on. Get to the dugout, you take it into the dugout, you're bringing your teammates down, you're becoming a bad teammate. That 5 seconds is over. That's when we got a problem.
Yep.
And then effort. Physical mistakes are going to happen. The ball is going to roll up your arm. It's going to roll between your legs. Physical mistakes I can live with. Mental mistakes we're going to learn from. Where you're going to hear me get upset or any of our coaches get upset is if that ball rolls between your legs and you're feeling bad for yourself and you're the last one to go pick it up, that's when we got the issue. So
No doubt.
attitude and effort, give me a good attitude, give me everything you got, you're going to have no problems.
That's pretty good life advice too. Maddie, I appreciate the time, man. It's been a lot of fun catching up. This has been some good stuff.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Let's do it again. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the No One Is Watching podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to hit subscribe to be notified of future episodes. If you'd like to support the show, please take a second, leave a rating and review, or share it with your friends.
If you're interested in similar content, you can check out my website at nooneiswatching.com, where you can subscribe to the newsletter, read my blog, or follow me on your social media platform of choice. Look, your time is valuable, so thank you for lending me some of it. We'll see you next time.